line. Congressman John Shimkus here in studio. I always got confused on this. The mandate that says you must have health insurance. Are you in favor of that? Are you against that?
On this studio, I've talked about that. Most conservatives aren't.
Right.
People who believe in mandates. I do believe that you should have some health insurance coverage. I do believe it's catastrophic, so that there's no fear of losing your livelihood, your home, you go bankrupt and all this stuff. I do think if you develop state exchanges and the federal insurance requirement would be basic catastrophic coverage, then I think each state could have that, and then you could move easily from state to state and then go back into their state pool, which would have catastrophic coverage. I think it makes the system a lot easier. Now, so the answer is yes. But hold
on a second. This is important. Yes, but you think it should come from the states and not the federal government.
Well, the law right now says the federal government will set the standard for the state exchanges. And I would be pushing that the standard would be a catastrophic package that is in the state exchange.
Okay.
And then yes. Some people say if you have these high-risk pools, that's where people should be going in right now when there's no coverage. Some people say if you don't have that, then you would go in the high-risk pool. So there would be coverage anyway. But I've always been one to say I think catastrophic health insurance policy really solves a lot of the problems of providers, especially in the high-end, high-cost, not being covered. Now, you might still have a deductible.
Right.
But if the whole –
at least it protects you from losing your house.
It's a $150,000 health care cost, and the hospital is going to get paid for the ICU and the recuperation and all that stuff, and then you make a decision based upon where you want coverage. Then you could buy additional coverage on your own, or your employer may want to wrap that plan around with other coverage. But that would be up to them. See, we're walking down an interesting path where I think that the employer-based system, if we move in this direction, it will go by the wayside. Because I think a lot of employers are going to look at this and say, I'm just going to pay the fine and let people go into the private.
Right. Well, pools. It also leads you to a question. Big corporations like General Motors and AT&T and IBM, you have to ask yourself, how much money are they spending on health insurance?
Right.
And wouldn't it be easier if they just hired a hospital or a doctor and just sort of did it themselves?
Right. Well, but I think what they will end up doing, because I think in business you do look at your core competencies, and maybe IBM's not a hospital. Right. But I always wondered that, because during reform of a decade ago, we thought that hospitals and doctors would join and they would compete against insurance companies. But we found out that they couldn't actuarially assume all that risk that insurance companies do because of the massive amount of money they have. So it just never – we thought providers would get in the coverage game, but they just didn't. But I do think you'll see them doing a cost-benefit analysis of what's the cost to not cover plus the cost of not having someone or going into contractual negotiations as a health care benefit package.
Right.
And let's just put them in the state exchanges.
Yeah, interesting. John Shimkus, Congressman John Shimkus, our guest, Republican from Illinois, the 19th District. We'll come back. We'll take some phone calls, 928 here on the Big 550 KTRS. Congressman John Shimkus, our guest here in studio. We have a couple of phone calls. We're going to get to all of them. But before we go to the phones, Congressman Shimkus, you've been in Congress 13, 14 years now?
This is my 14th.
14th year. Is this the worst in terms of bipartisanship and talking across the aisle that you've seen, or is it just smoke and mirrors and it's all the same behind
I always tell people, go up to Springfield, Illinois, go into the Lincoln Library and see the depictions of how the opposition portrayed Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's got horns, he's got a pitchfork, he's got a tail.
Right.
There's been beatings on the floor of the House during the emancipation debates and stuff. I think, and I was at Council High School. That's my alma mater. I was at a government class, and we were kind of talking about this. I said, you want people of passion. You want people of values and will stand and fight for what they believe and what they believe their district represents. So this is a huge shift. We're seeing historic debt numbers, historic deficit numbers, bigger government. A lot of us didn't go to Washington to do that. So is it intense? Yeah, that last 2 weeks before the break, we all knew, especially when they held us over that weekend.
Right. And
then I think we all knew, man, we need to get home, otherwise people are going to be thrown out windows and off the roof. And right. It was tiring.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who have tiring and stressful jobs.
Right. And somebody who can at least cross the party lines and play basketball with the president. So
I haven't really visited with him since. But,
okay, just fair.
But I think he did school me, I have to admit. So he probably might want me to come back.
All right, let's go to the phones. Congressman Shimkus, our guest. I ask you to keep your questions short and brief so we can get to as many as possible. John, thanks for holding on. Welcome to KTRS.
Hi, Congressman. Hey, I have a question about the Internal Revenue involvement. I've been wondering about this since the very beginning. I understand the way the system's going to work. Every doctor or hospital, when you walk in, you're going to basically produce a Social Security.
The question is, how is this going to work? Sorry.
Yeah, and I think we're just doing. Some people are sending taxes in now. I mean, I just signed my life away last night, and it'll be like a 1099 form that you include on your IRS statement that proves that the insurance you have. I mean, the IRS agents are going to get that information and make sure that the policy you have included on your income tax statement meets the federal standard.
Right.
So that's their role. I mean, they're going to be the cop to make sure that individuals are covered by whatever we say will be the basic federal required package.
And if you don't, then
there's a fine.
Then there's the fine that they collect.
Right.
Great. All right. Good. Well, all right. Well, no comment on the IRS since I have my own issues with the IRS currently, which I can talk to Congressman Shimkus off the air. Bill Hodge, quickly, what's your question?
Yes, I've always appreciated the congressman's thoughtful views, and as you know, some of the states are going to court to try to opt out. And I was wondering if the Republicans in Congress considered offering a provision in the bill allowing states to opt out.
Bill, thanks for the phone call.
We offered numerous. Now, remember this Senate bill. I can't talk to how the Senate and their amendment process and what was offered, but the House bill went through us, and we offered numerous opt-out provisions on increased Medicaid costs, expansion of this, expansion of that. And we wanted to give states the opportunity to do that. So, I mean, they were all defeated. But this is a good question because this independent movement out there, and they're always all carrying around the Constitution, they are now readdressing something that should have been asked 70 years ago. What's the role of the federal government? What is the 10th Amendment? Or is the federal government doing things that founding fathers never intended? Now, that was a long time ago, but that's the debate. So there's two constitutional questions being asked. One is, can you force someone to buy something and then regulate them under the Interstate Commerce Clause based upon the forced purchase of an item?
Right.
That's I don't know. I've been reading pundits on both sides. Those who say yes, they'll point to Medicare. Okay, we tax Medicare. We require seniors so that we can do that. Other people are saying, but this is you're going to force someone to buy something first, so it's kind of the cart before the horse.
Right.
The other issue is the increase in the Medicaid plan. In the state of Illinois, we're a very, Matt Blunt, for all the harassment he got, he helped rein in the Missouri budget by addressing the entitlement of Medicaid. And you know how much grief he got.
Right.
But he did help control. Missouri is not in the fiscal problem, believe it or not, that Illinois is. Illinois is $12.5 billion in debt. Most of that is Rod Blagojevic's expansion of Medicaid, which we never paid for. Even this federal bill expands it more to add an additional $2 billion increased mandate to a state that's $12.5 billion in debt. So some states are going, hey, wait a second. This is a 50-50 plan. We set the parameters. You're going to now mandate. You're going to force us, and then we don't have the money to pay for it.
Let's go to Chad. Chad, quickly, what's your question for Congressman Shimkus?
I just want to know what Congressman's voting record was the last 8 years up under George Bush. I think he was like 90% rubber stamp for him. So what's the difference from 8 years now versus all the complaints he's got going right now?
In terms of spending or what?
Yeah, in terms of spending, because I think he voted to rebuild Iraq and all that other stuff that took trillions of dollars out of our budget and sent it over to Iraq. So I mean,
yeah. Let me answer. I'll be
but he's not.
Chad,
he didn't do it then.
Chad. Oh, we got the question, Congressman.
Yeah. First, I mean, they can only beat up on George Bush so long. Eventually, they're going to realize we have a president named Barack Obama and a speaker named Nancy Pelosi and a majority leader of the Senate named Harry Reid. And Pelosi and Reid have been in power for 3 years. That's first issue. Second issue, Republicans were thrown out of power. Why? We spent too much money. We got it. We understand it, and we paid the penalty. And I think Democrats this fall will pay the penalty for reckless spending and increasing the deficit and the national debt.
You know what? I actually agree with you in that Republicans were thrown out of office for that specific reason. And so as much as you can, they have been blamed and they've been punished, if you will.
And I will tell you, you go to these independent rallies, Tea Parties, September 12th, whatever you call them, they don't really trust us. I mean, they're not really trusting Republicans, but we're the only team on the field right now.
Right.
So if they allow us back in power, I think they're going to hold us to a pretty high standard.
Let's go back to phones. Joe, line 1, you're on KTRS.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question real quick. Basically, you sound very eloquent in, the positions that you have as far as the cons of the health care, but why didn't your party as a whole, and why didn't you follow Barack's lead in actually trying to address things and make it a better bill? I know McGraw has said a lot of times, instead of just saying no, and all these scare tactics about death squads, I think it's refreshing to actually talk about the numbers. And if you talk about the numbers, the CBO numbers, I could be wrong on this, but they said it was lowering the deficit, and Bush's financial person said one of the reasons Bush never had any profits was because the health care was eating up any kind of profits he has. I think you've been addressing your points very well. Thank you very much.
Joe, thank you very much for the call.
It's a great call. And let me talk about the CBO and the scoring. But they did not include the doc fix, which is $200 billion. And they intentionally didn't include that. They promised the EMA they would do what's called the doc fix. And now we're going to have to go back and pass the doc. The doc fix is a Medicare reduction in payment to physicians. And it's 22%. We're going to reduce doctors' pay if they serve Medicare by 22%. Unless we say, no, we're going to stop that. $200 billion was supposed to be in this bill. They kept it out so they could have a good CBO score. We just think that's Jimmy in the books. The other issue we did, associated health plans, medical savings accounts, 100% deductibility of private insurance plans. Why weren't they passed on a Republican majority? Because the Senate Democrats would always filibuster. Why would they filibuster expansion of insurance to people and make it easier? Well, because we believe they really want to go to a one-payer system. Their argument to throw out the old system is not as strong if the pool of the uninsured is smaller.